Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CX Connect, brought to you by CRM, Smart Customer Service, and our platinum sponsor, Zendesk. I'm Bob Fernikes, and I'm the publisher of CRM Magazine, and I'll be the moderator for this week's webcast. I'm sure many of you have attended one of our many webcasts over the last 25 years, but this year we're doing something a little bit different. Before we start today, we are going to watch a brief video from Zendesk. Then we will come back and introduce our speaker in today's presentation. So let's take a look at the video.
Everything you need to turn this
call is very important to us.
into this is powered by Zendesk. Whether it's lost items, long hold times, the wrong size, unexpected delays, everything you need to get from unhappy customers to making it right. It's powered by Zendesk. Customer service software that works for your business and your customers.
Okay, we're back. So now I'm going to introduce today's session and speaker. Again, we have Zendesk. The name of the presentation is The 5 Customer Service Traps That Derail Growth. But before we start, I just want to explain how you can be part of the broadcast today. We will have a Q&A session at the end. So if I could ask everybody to use the Q&A tab rather than the chat tab, that would be great. It just keeps all questions in a spot we can easily get to them. So now to introduce our speaker for today, we've got Josh Bean, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Zendesk. Welcome to the broadcast, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
Great. You could just jump right in. I'm really excited to hear this.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me. And more importantly, thank you to all of you for joining today's session. As Bob mentioned, my name is Josh, and I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing here at Zendesk. And I know we just had that quick video on Zendesk, but for those of you that aren't familiar, Zendesk is a customer service product that powers customer service interactions around the world with some of your favorite brands. And today I'm going to be sharing some of the insights that we've gathered in partnership with a bunch of our customers and a lot of the research that we've done. So I'll cover a number of different traps that we've identified. These are things that you want to look out for as you go through and do your annual planning, things that you want to just be top of mind of and avoid, and hopefully put you on the right track to success. Now, we all know that customer service is a competitive differentiator. It's important to customers, and it's really been a profit generating force for companies, but customer service is really more than we get credit for, right? A lot of folks think about it as answering phone calls from maybe unhappy customers or responding to angry emails, but it's more than just an empathetic answer. It's, as someone that's really been working closely in customer experience, we've known that there's a lot more to customer experience, but I think externally there's a lot of education to do. And what we want to do is, give you some of that knowledge that can help become a driving force at these tables of conversation. So, yeah, there we go. So whether your organization's already, driving and differentiating with CX, or you're just starting to scale and grow, you can really use customer service as a game changer for your business. And when you do customer service right, think about all your favorite brands. It can help attract new business. It can boost retention. It can increase sales from your existing customers. In other words, customer service should be your game changer. It should be your competitive advantage, and it should be something to celebrate. And that's really what we want to give you the power to do with today's session. So here at Zendesk, we gather data from 97,000 customers that participated in our benchmark program. We ran surveys of customers, agents, customer service practitioners, business leaders across 21 different countries. And when you do that, you can kind of tell a pretty compelling story. So let's talk about what we found. What we learned was that customer service can drive bigger profits. We learned that customer expectations are higher than ever before. We've learned that leaders have roadblocks that they really need to avoid, and that there are high performers that we can actually learn from. And finally, technology can accelerate growth. Now, these aren't groundbreaking, but what we hope to arm you with is a lot of stats. So when you have these conversations, you can actually bring a little bit of firepower with all of everything that you're observing. So with all of these observations, we're bringing you learnings, we're helping you avoid these traps, and we will really help you understand that it's these traps to customer service are something that can be avoided and that you can overcome. So when you think about who this is a challenge for as well, it's not just you, right? There are leaders across your businesses that are trying to make meaningful change. They're trying to get buy-in at every level. They're fighting for budget, and folks can just get caught up. So we don't want CX being one of those things that gets pushed aside. So in this session, you will be sure to kind of have the data to know that phone, email, chats, message, social interactions, carrier pigeons, that those are just ways that you interact with customers, but there's much more beyond that. So without further ado, I want to talk about how you can get over these traps, and starting with the first trap around customer service. And this is the idea that you really don't need to kind of wow your customers. When you hear about the phrase delight your customers, it's thrown around so much that you all kind of figure it as the unquestionable truth that customers just need to be wowed. But we know that businesses and customers aren't always in sync. When we went and looked at the data, 60% of companies surveyed gave themselves high marks for service. 54% of customers report that the customer service feels like an afterthought, and 68 say there's room for improvement. And the truth is that customer expectations are also changing. 61% report that the global pandemic has raised their standards for customer service. But that doesn't mean that companies aren't trying to keep up. There's more channels, there's faster resolutions, agents are being helpful. And while all of these companies are doing more and more to make their customers happy, so you know the drill. It's COVID. We need to make everyone super happy. Like, we need people to be more helpful. We need to respond faster. We need to be everywhere that they are. And you're trying to do this crazy experience. The result is only 18% of customers are satisfied with the channels they offer. Less than 20% rate their resolution as extremely strong, and only 21% say it's extremely easy for customers to interact with their business. So it's almost like one of those situations where you're trying to do so much and you're trying so hard, but you're almost doing too much. And customers, in fact, maybe don't need to be completely wowed, and they just want you to listen. So when you think about speed, convenience, most of all, think about just listening to your customers, maybe not pulling out all the bells and whistles and all the craziness, but just be a listener, respond to that as a human, and that can go a very, very long way. With better customer listening, organizations can get in sync with all of their customers a lot faster. You can stop spending on over-the-top experiences. You can take action in the areas that your customers really want you to do. You see this a lot on various roadmaps where you're doing all this crazy stuff and they're like, I just want that basic feature. So make your customers' experience easier. You can do that through more accessible channels, through intuitive self-service, well-trained agents. Just think about, you don't need to wow your customers. You just need to listen to them and make them feel heard. So that's the first trap that I wanted to highlight. I would also encourage for all those folks that are watching, if you disagree, I see something different, let's talk about it. Drop a question in the Q&A and we can absolutely go through those towards the end of the session. I would love to learn more about that. Now, as we hop into the second trap to watch out for, executives know that customer service is important to their organization, right? We've all been on that customer end. It's important to get help when you need it. In fact, 72% of business leaders say that their organization views customer service as a critical business priority. But their actions tell a little bit of a different story. And that's kind of a trap question, right? Of course, we think customer service is important to our business. That's how you interact. But when you actually look at the downstream impact, 40% report that customer service isn't owned by anyone in the C-suite, and only 20% report that senior leadership reviews customer service metrics daily. And with 40% reporting weekly and the other 40% reporting monthly. So there's all of these folks that are saying, yes, of course it's important. But when it actually comes down to, are you looking at the metrics? Are you kind of holding yourselves accountable? Are you holding your teams accountable? We're not actually seeing the actions there. And even deeper, hit the wallet. And 20% report that senior compensation isn't linked to any customer service metrics. 1 in 2 or 52% report that compensation is linked to CSAT scores, while others in NPS, 38%, and even fewer, 26% in customer retention. So you can see a world where if there's much all this belief in CX, but if it's not really impacting the pay, oftentimes it doesn't actually kind of translate all the way through. And the value of customer service is very real. 64% of leaders reported that customer service has a positive impact on their company's growth. 60% say it improves customer retention, and almost half report that improvements in customer service have increased their ability to cross-sell. But without a real commitment to customer service, executives risk the opportunity for meaningful change. This is the part that was actually crazy for me through all of the stuff. Like, we know that CX can drive growth, it can keep customers around longer, and everyone believes in it, but no one's really kind of giving it that seat at the table. To realize the full benefits, executives need to give customer service a seat at the table, right? They have, high performing companies are 9.2 times more likely to report that senior leaders, oh my gosh, hop to the very last slide. Watch out. Let me go back. Sorry, everyone. So this is a good time to note, if you're ever doing a presentation, there's some keyboards have a button that says end on it, and absolutely never click that in your presentation, because that will happen. Sorry about that. So to realize the full benefits, executives need to really give customer service a seat at the table. When you look at the high performing companies, as I mentioned, 9.2 times more likely to report that senior leaders view customer service metrics daily, 7.7 times more likely to strongly agree that senior leaders immerse themselves in customer service, 6.2 times more likely to have customer service owned by a C-suite exec, and 5.7 times more likely to have a 3-year strategic plan for customer service, and finally 4.2 times more likely to report that senior leadership compensation is directly linked to Net Promoter Score. So these are a lot of stats that you can still use in your planning metrics. Even if you're on C-suite, start to think about how you could fold these things in. But really powerful to think about the companies that are adopting CX and actually kind of like walking the walk versus those that just talk the talk. And I know if you're not on the C-suite or on the side, you can't expect the C-suite to shadow agents, listen in on support calls, but you can arm them with the data. You can give them customer feedback. You can make sure that you're really creating a clear story and push it throughout the organization, so everyone knows the challenges customers are seeing, what they're saying back to you, all of the feedback that's going on there. And this can be a job for everyone throughout the organization. Next up, and I know we're clicking through these slides super fast, so I believe we'll be sharing them. I'll share how you can get them at the end as well, if you want to pull any of these stats or slides for your own use. In track number 3, the question is your customer service team valued as much as they should be? And when we say this, in our research, 1 in 3 companies still view customer service as a cost center instead of what it really is, a revenue generating engine for growth. And because they're looking at customer service as an expense, they aren't properly funding budgets to really keep up with their needs. If I think about some of my favorite brands, I may go out of my way to go to a coffee shop, not because the coffee's better, but because the people are friendlier or because they get my order right. And it's these types of considerations that really can kind of grow CX. In the research that we did, 30% of the businesses plan to increase their budgets by 10% in the next year, and then 20% the following year. So there's movement, right? Although since we've done this research, I think inflation is kind of eating up a lot of that even as well. But companies are still failing to keep up with the anticipated increase in customer service ticket volumes over the next 12 to 14 months. In fact, ticket volumes are forecasted 3 to 9% higher than investment levels in the next year. So you've got investment going one way, you've got the ticket volumes even ahead of that. And what do? How do you challenge it? Well, what we see the kind of top tier high performing companies do are things like 7.6 times more likely to strongly agree that they view customer service primarily as a revenue driver, 6.7 times more likely to track profit and loss for their customer service team, 6.2 times more likely to strongly agree that customer service funding has kept pace with company growth, 5.2 times more likely to strongly agree that their organization adequately funds customer service, and 3.4 times more likely to have plans to increase customer service investment by 25% or more in the next year. Now, don't get me wrong, 25% investment for an organization, you're either very small in the early days, that is a pretty substantial investment. But I think what you can gather from this is companies that are actually thinking about how to use all of these customer interactions to really promote your product, your services, are the ones that are really succeeding. So you might be wondering, what exactly makes customer service a revenue generator? Well, customer service drives positive ROI growth. It drives retention. It surfaces upsell opportunities. It surfaces cross-sell opportunities. It's all of these interactions, which I'm a big believer that you hold a certain affinity for a brand or a company, and every interaction that you have, you're either gaining trust or eroding trust. And a lot of times the customer service experience is something that often erodes trust or kind of just gets you back to the baseline. But it is those opportunities to be a good listener, repeat back, solve problems quickly, and just doing what is asked can often make people customers for a very, very long time. When we looked deeper into the data of the customers that we surveyed, 64% estimated a positive impact on business growth. So investing in CX it resulted in business growth, and 60% impact on customer retention, and almost half reporting that it had an impact on cross-sell revenue. So this is a big area where we at Zendesk, we talk about this funny thing that happens where in your business, you've got one part of the company where people are calling in all day long, your CX team, right? People are calling in, getting in contact with you, you're having conversations, solving problems. Then in the other side of the office, you've got your sales team. They spend all day also trying to have conversations, but they are the ones initiating them, going outbound. And what you fail to notice is a lot of times the person reaching out to your support team asking about a feature on a higher plan or documentation around pricing, those are buying signals, and that's where you can really leverage the cross sell. So there's a lot to think about there. And now, if the idea of your agents trying to sell to your customers sounds a little icky and you don't want to do that, you're not alone. But instead of delivering this used car pitch, think about it as a chance to help your customers, right? It's an opportunity to be a knowledgeable advisor and help your customers or your prospects be guided to the solutions that they need. And you can also train and position your agents so that they can really naturally mention new products, better solutions, and alternatives, empower them to really offer value and advice, and not just, oh my gosh, you asked a sales question, let me pull up my sales script that I need to read to you and go through that. You don't need to go to those extremes, but it's also just surfacing it to your team that, there are revenue generating opportunities are something that are worth mentioning. Next up, we'll transition over to trap number 4. And man, the last few years have been rough, right? We see that support agents are burned out, and it's not a surprise. There's been a lot going on. And customer service agents are on the front lines of organizations, and their need has only exploded since the pandemic. These are folks that I think were similar to the cost center conversation. These are many folks that have just been kind of looked as a cost center and a service, a cost of doing business. But the reality is there's a ton of value there with extraordinary people and great customer insights because of all the conversations they're having. But even with stores reopening and the world starting to figure out what this new normal looks like, consumers say that 25% of overall shopping is still online. Almost half of online shoppers say they're frequently interacting with customer service, right? There's more people going to an e-commerce type model. And as a result, you have more of these virtual service issues coming up. 58% of agents in our research recognize that their role is growing in importance, and 44% report that their work is more strategic. And finally, 43% say that senior management is paying more attention than ever before. So these are encouraging stats, right? We see that the shift of service from a cost center to a revenue generating org. We see that folks are becoming more strategic as they go through all of these different motions. And we also see that there's opportunities to get our C-suite more involved in all of these things. So there's a really dynamic story coming together here of all the different parts of the business that are all centered around CX. But when you think about, agents are having more strategic roles, or they're getting more opportunities, but they also have record volume of tickets. Agents are tired and burned out. They have heavier workloads, more responsibility, and more stress. It's not like anyone's saying, hey, you know what? Forget about all those tickets. Just figure out the strategic challenge that we're having. It's much more of a balance, trying to make it all work out. And that really can take its toll. However, while companies recognize the value of their agents, they often aren't treated with the same respect, right? 38% of organizations surveyed reported that customer service teams aren't treated as well as other teams in their org. And I think this is one to keep in mind, right? Perhaps I think the most common thing, you look over at your folks in sales and be like, man, they're treated a little bit different, maybe because they're bringing in revenue. But keep in mind, they are also on variable compensation. So if they don't perform, they're not getting paid as well. So there's two sides to each coin. But yeah, I'm with you as someone that's working very closely with CX teams day in and day out. Like, there is kind of this lack of respect, and it's time to change. And they also aren't getting that training that they need to be effective as possible. So in the survey, 1 in 4 reported receiving less than 1 day or no training, and 44% reported receiving between 2 and 5 days of training. Now, imagine getting 1 day of training and being thrown to the front line. And no wonder customers are getting angry. I've barely been doing this. I don't know what's going on. So we really need to make sure that we're putting our agents and our frontline support in a position to really succeed. But the good news is companies are slowly starting to wake up to the fact that they need to improve their treatment of customer service agents. 78% agree that customer service agents are essential to retaining customers, and 71% brag that their agents are of the highest caliber. 28% are planning to greatly increase training, and with another 53% planning to somewhat increase training. So there's certainly a balance in the spectrum there, but I think that folks are starting to wake up and really see what's going on. And businesses that get it, that focusing on training efforts, and these businesses that get it are focusing their training efforts in these 3 critical areas, right? So 53% are training agents to cross-sell, upsell their customers. 51% develop flexible teams to solve specialized problems, and 48% are training agents to serve multiple channels. So what we're really doing here is creating dynamic agents that are able to be resourceful, helpful, and so they listen to what you need and they can go out and actually help you because they have been set up for success. And the high performing companies are 9.9 times more likely to strongly agree that their agents are of the highest caliber, 6.4 times more likely to have plans to greatly extend education and training opportunities, and finally 4.3 times more likely to recognize that their agents are overworked. So as a result, their agents are, so these companies that are getting it, they're investing, they know people are being overworked. What's the output of these businesses? 9.9 times more likely to be extremely satisfied with their workflows with AI-powered tools, and 8.3 times more likely to be extremely satisfied with frequency of training. So what we see here are teams getting trained. They're also adding more tools, things like AI, to maybe ease that workload and increase the training overall. So fixing burnout and making agents feel more valued starts with listening to their needs. Just like you have to listen to your customers, you have to listen to your agents as well. Think about manageable workloads, more training, and better performance metrics. This can also be paired with clear advancement opportunities, and putting it all together can really make your team feel heard and structured for success. Again, when we looked at some of the businesses that we talked to, only 15% are extremely satisfied with their workload. Only 1 in 5 express receiving quality training, and 62% reported that more skills-based training would improve their performance. As far as how their performance is measured, only 14 are happy with the metrics used. So there's still work to be done. And only 14% are extremely satisfied with the careers open to them. So businesses know that there's opportunities and there's lots of needs, but I don't think that agents are finally being heard and really understood just quite yet, but there's a glimmer of hope. So it seems that, we're not really doing a stellar job at showing agents how much we appreciate them. This is why it's so important to recognize, because unhappy agents are a really slippery slope. They can lead to higher churn rates and ultimately dissatisfied customers, because customers do notice if you're speaking to someone that's having a really hard day and maybe not super excited, like all of these things that energy feeds onto customers, and you want to make sure that you're not giving that vibe off to your customers. You want them to be in really encouraging and positive environments there. Now, would you believe that we're at our last customer service trap, and this one, it's a doozy. When customers engage with your company, they have high expectations. And as we mentioned, they've only gotten higher since the pandemic. Things have only gotten higher. 68% of customers expect personalization each and every time they reach out. 71% want internal teams to share information so they don't have to repeat themselves. To meet the expectations of customers, high-performing companies have streamlined their customer service and made the experience even easier and more convenient. Now, they're 6.8 times more likely to have already implemented conversational customer service capabilities, adding messaging channels like Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, and they can even switch between channels in a single ticket, keeping the conversation seamless. They're also almost 4 times more likely to allow customers to start and pause conversations with an agent, giving them a more convenient experience. If you think about, taking a step away from the survey for a moment, if you think about your life and all the different ways that you communicate today, very different from how you communicated even 5 or so years ago. Today you have things like WhatsApp, maybe you're communicating in DMs and Instagram, text, SMS, text, phone calls. You might do web chats with companies. Like, there's all of these different channels going on. And there's two steps to that. The first step is making sure that, one, you are capturing all those different channels, you're participating in those areas, you're able to communicate wherever your customers are. The second step, though, is carrying a seamless conversation across each of those channels. When you're talking to someone in text message and then you call them, you don't restart that conversation, you pick up where you left off. And what this section is all about is kind of continuing that, being able to offer that same experience. So if someone needs to step away or they have another question, you can pick right up where you went. It's not a, hey, why don't you tell me all the past interactions that you've had with our business so I can figure out what to do next. Like, that's not the customer's responsibility. So, and a way that you can do that is, starting to use chatbots to kind of help intake and triage and address all of that. So, they're almost, these types of companies that we looked at, they're almost 3 times more likely to use AI-powered chatbots. The chatbots help agents better manage their workflow by answering simple questions, sharing articles, and providing 24/7 self-help options. So customers are never really stuck waiting on an answer. Think about it as, there's a lot of easy stuff that you address all day, every day. How do I reset my password? What's your return policy? You can point these to articles and things that are already out there. And sometimes it's just, having something to intake that and output it can really free up a lot of time for your reps. And the focus doesn't stop there. High performers also focus on their next steps in customer experience. So these businesses are 4 times more likely to be extremely interested in revamping their metrics around the quality of the customer experience. And they're almost 4 times more likely to be extremely interested in giving agents a full view of customer data, and 4.8 times more likely to be extremely interested in verifying customer identity and commerce history without connecting them to an agent. So imagine an experience where you go to a chatbot. I think actually Amazon's got a great experience around this, right? If I need to return something, I don't have to connect with an agent. I pull up all my past orders. I say I want to return that. It's like, cool, here's 3 different ways to return it. No big deal. Off you go. Like, it's very seamless. And that's because all of these communication channels are connected with my e-commerce history, my identity, all of that stuff. And changes like these would not only streamline that customer experience, but it can be a game changer in terms of service overall and for profits. So over 90% of customers say that they'll spend more money with companies that can personalize and streamline the experiences they're looking for. To give customers that kind of experience they expect, companies will need to design a new internal workflow and process. It won't be easy, but it will definitely be worth it. I think we made a video years and years ago around, it was the whole premise of this daughter was calling home to her parents, and you don't need to identify yourself every time because it's your family. But the joke was that, like, great, what's your date of birth? What's my maiden name? All of these different questions. And it's absurd to ask that in a family setting, but when you go to a business, it's very much expected, and it doesn't have to be that way. So we made it through the 5 customer service traps that can really derail your growth. And, the first step is understanding what the traps are, but now is where the true work begins. It's important to digest these, think about all of the different challenges that you're running into, think about how to get your executive staff on board, think about the impact to your customers. Are you listening to them? Think about, are you kind of enabling your team with the training? Are you giving them a proper workload? How can you maybe use things like AI and bots to kind of lift up some of that pressure? All of these things are vital to really making sure that your CX is a growth engine. As a quick aside, I think that as CX professionals, we're given a really interesting opportunity with COVID, where folks are finally realizing the value of CX, and we're starting to have a seat at the table. And now is an opportunity to use that seat to become a strategic partner, to become a growth engine. All of these things that can really make a difference for the org. And I'm excited about what's ahead. I think that there's a lot of positive. We've been through a lot of hard times. Like, it was rough, but I think that there's a lot of positive things coming ahead. So that is all of the content that I wanted to run through. We went through those a little bit quick, but if you want a copy of all of these trends, there's a whole report, a bunch of stuff. I think if you just do a quick Google search for Zendesk CX trends, you'll be spotted to, or you'll be taken to something that can help you get all of that stuff. If you want to find me on LinkedIn or wherever, you just look me up. Happy to talk, continue the conversation, and give some insight or help as well. But at this point, I'll open it up to see if there's any questions, and happy to take any feedback too.
Sure, we got a couple questions, and I encourage everyone. Covered a lot of information. Fantastic study. I am definitely downloading that because I want it all in one place. I don't want to have to search for all these nuggets of information all over the place. So I encourage everybody else to do that as well. It's interesting, Josh. I remember a study like this who looked at the leaders in a very comprehensive way, as you guys did. And it was probably, I don't know, 7 to 10 years ago. And they actually correlated all the leaders' metrics with stock value, shareholder value, and it was amazing. I forget who did it. I think it was a McKinsey study, but would love to see some of that. Also, on some of the slides, I kept seeing 9.9x, and then I said, wait a second, that's not 9.9%. That's 990%. Those are some.
That's right.
Some fantastic numbers. So with that being said, I've got a couple questions here, and I'm going to jump right into them. And I'll just ask you with a real broad one right now. What was the most surprising thing that you've seen out of the research?
Yeah, for me, it was around surprising, and I guess I had my suspicions, but it was really interesting to confirm around the lack of commitments at the C-staff level to tying compensation, or even just committing to looking at metrics quite frequently. That was quite revealing to me, just because executive teams are thinking day in and day out, how do we grow our business? How do we advance? How do we make our customers happier? And there's this whole roadmap right ahead, right? It's very simple. Listen to your customers, focus on these metrics. I'm a big believer that if you're not tracking metrics, they won't go up, right? You need to be looking at those metrics over and over. So the fact that a lot of executives were just kind of bypassing that, surprising, disappointing, encouraging, all in the same moment.
Great. Well, I guess that's why McKinsey pegged stock value and shareholder value, because that gets the attention of the board, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, they don't miss those. Here's just a quick question from one of our viewers, and he's asking, I find customer service hard to measure. What are some of the best KPIs for measuring customer service? I'm sure you have a whole slew of them, and it kind of changes depending on the company, but.
Yeah, I think that there's two risks to benchmarks, right? One is, just seeing a number and using that as a benchmark and saying, like, oh my gosh, we have to go after it. For example, solves, like one-touch solves. Okay, that's a cool metric to track, and maybe I see in some presentation that I need to be at like 92% one-touch solves to have like great. But I just got a email from a company today, actually, and it was like, hey, we think we've answered your question. We will automatically solve this in 72 hours if we don't hear back from you. Thank you. And like, didn't even come close to answering the question, but it's set to auto solve, and they'll probably have very high one-touch solves because they have a workflow into auto solve. So in terms of what metrics, I think the first thing is to be careful about, looking at benchmarks and like making erratic changes. The second part, though, is to think about the metrics that you want to improve upon. So like I said, I think that if you're not tracking it, it's not going to be a focus for the team. It's not going to go up. So common things to look at are, of course, customer satisfaction. Ask, was this a good experience? Happy face, sad face, 1 to 5. You can follow up with those types of scores. Some interesting ones I've seen were at one point with one company, we experimented with actually asking customers to leave a review of the company on like G2 Crowd or other places, with the thought being that our reps would only ask companies to leave a review if they really thought they delivered solved the problem or delivered a good experience. So that was a little bit more revealing, also a good thing to track. But I think that overall you want to really focus on that customer satisfaction, like the NPS side of things, and then look at secondary metrics. I love data, and the last metric thing I would say is it's okay to have different metrics that you look at different times. So you might be looking at NPS daily and looking at the trends there, and then you might look at ticket volume by time of day on a monthly cadence, and you might look at commonly asked questions and where we have gaps in our self-service content on a quarterly basis. So there's different metrics to look at in different cadences.
Great. One of the, a big chunk of the metrics that, you guys were able to surface had to do with the actual employee experience, which probably several years ago, that wasn't a thing. Everything was concentrated on the customer only, kind of negating. We have a question here that came in basically about some other things that you had touched on. How do you deal with employees in a really tight employment market who are overworked and probably underappreciated? Can you give us any stats on how you empower those people to do their jobs better with the correct tools?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you are, right? If you're a manager, of course, you can try to prove the value that you can be a cost center, you can grow in the cross-sell, all of those things, and try to bring in perhaps better technology or other things to improve that experience. The other thing though is if you're a frontline employee that maybe doesn't have that power, like you can try to push that forward. But the good thing is there's a lot of companies that are taking CX very seriously and that prioritize it both for their employees' experience and for their customers' experience. And the good thing is like there's a lot of companies hiring, and go if you're at a company that doesn't really believe in it, like there's plenty that do. So I would encourage you to look at other opportunities too.
All right, great. Now that you've done all this research and seen all the trends, and by the way, I'm sure with 97,000 customers that you can probably crosshatch this either way, any which way you would like. But now that you've done all the research, seen all the trends, what's ahead? I know that's a big question, but we've hit a reset and it's not business as usual.
Yeah, a big focus for us is we've got the data, we've validated there's opportunity. The trends after COVID, or even with COVID, are presenting opportunities. Now it's more so like, how do we enable all of these incredible businesses, incredible teams to actually put forth a playbook and go through and actually make this happen, right? How do we have the rubber meet the road and do this type of digital transformation? So it's much more focused on different types of content, about how to get started, how to improve. And I think the important thing to know is you're not alone in this. Like we see this globally. There's companies all over. The consumers have changed their expectations, and the companies that shift and adapt and meet those expectations will succeed. Those that kind of neglect it, they'll survive for a while, but they're going to struggle. And I think ultimately the consumers will decide what, they want better experiences, and that will show in the business's bottom lines.
All right. Hey, we got a question from Amanda, and she's using an acronym that she may have coined because I haven't read it before. She's saying ROX, return on experience. I think that's a great one because it's, customer experience and employee experience. And so the question is, ROX, return on experience, is becoming much more talked about. I find most companies struggle to determine how to measure this. Are there some metrics most organizations can use? Executives love the data, but don't always know exactly what they want. I'm gonna insert return on investment because I think that's really what the management really wants. Hey, if we're spending all this stuff, whether it's on customer experience or employee experience or these types of programs, how much are we going to make or how much are we going to save?
Yeah. Before COVID, I once went on this like 16 city road show with this author of a sales book, and he spoke a lot about like brain science and how consumers buy and the role of ROI in a purchase. And what he drilled into me was, oftentimes you buy with emotion and then you justify that with ROI. So, and I think the same is true for internal things. Like you need to really kind of build a emotion within the org around it, and then you justify it with, oh, and by the way, here's cost savings. Like if it was purely who can build the best return on experience model or ROI model, then it's like, all right, everyone submit your spreadsheet models to finance and we're just going to see which one's the most efficient and fund it. But like, that's not how it happens, right? It's much more about what's the customer experience going to be and the impact there. In terms of core metrics, which could perhaps feed that type of return on experience, I think that looking at employees, it's like employee satisfaction. It could be retention. If I know for sure if I had to go into work every day and jam away at an old 95 Windows 95 computer, like I probably would not be happy and go get a new job, right? So I think that like looking at that on the employee side, and then for the customer side, like if you really want to get crazy, answer half the customer tickets through like one service and do your normal flow with the other. Like you can split test things as well. But in my experience, it's much more about just kind of like buying consensus and use the core, like make your customers celebrities. Use these services, the experiences, the feedback, the moments, and share those broadly. I think that those will be much more memorable than a single stat that you could throw at someone.
Great. Your first trap, you don't need to wow the customers. I love that one. But immediately somebody asked a question, and I think it was probably sarcastic. And the question was, you mean the customer's not always right? Or something to that. Can you kind of explain what's good enough and makes sense for the customer and the company? Where do you draw that line?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I saw that, the first thing that I thought of was like all these crazy public freak out Instagrams where customers are freaking out saying like the customer is always right. Like the reality is no, like you can be wrong. And I kind of think we're in a little craziness there, but in all seriousness, I often think that it's very easy to think we know our customer, to think that you want this, but the reality is you want that. If you think about even personal relationships, oh my gosh, we went on this incredible date and we did this amazing dinner and all these awesome experiences. It's like, but honestly, I just wanted you to not be on the phone and talk to me, right? I don't care where we were. I don't care what we're eating. I just need to be heard and listened. And I think that it's kind of it's a little dramatized, but it's kind of the reality. Like customers, you need to learn now. There's always going to be some that you can't, no matter what, will not be successful.
Here's a question, and you may not want to get too specific, but with the study that you guys have just completed, I am sure you classified companies into leaders, laggards, and the middle of the pack. Can you at least kind of give us some examples, of people that are at possibly the top of the pack? You probably wouldn't mind mentioning those by names. Not so for the people that are at the bottom of the pack, but what really puts them into it? Are the people are the leaders, are they on the bleeding edge, or are they just the winners of the competition currently?
Yeah, I mean, with 97,000 customers, you literally get everything, right? I think that the big takeaway is those that are making their customers the happiest are seeing that carry throughout the business, right? They're seeing it. People want to do business with them. They want to have those experiences. So the companies that are actually prioritizing CX, the companies that are tracking the metrics, compensating accordingly, giving their teams all of the support they need, like those are the ones that are kind of leading the way. Is that kind of what you're asking, or did?
Yeah, basically, I mean, yeah, there's companies that especially some of the new model companies, the Ubers and the DoorDashes and people that are were digital right from the get-go as compared to brick and mortars. Yeah, I just wanted to see if there was any classification or even a market segment like healthcare or finance, or is it just a mix right now with the sort of the digital transformation people leading the charge?
I think that's it. It's like those that adopt, but the Ubers and the DoorDashes, all those, like, that's exactly it, right? I have a problem. I don't need to go to your website, or I don't need to I can just tap on help in the app. I could like chat, and it's like a bot will issue my refund for the food that never came, right? And I have this awesome experience, and then I go and buy something from a store, buy something online. It's like, dang, I just had this great, seamless, easy experience over on Uber, but why can't I have this everywhere? And these are like the leaders are kind of showing you what's possible, and then you expect it everywhere.
Right. So we'll all be judged by the people that were able to start from scratch when it mattered.
But that's a good thing, right? Use it to your advantage. If you do adopt, that means that customers are expecting what you do, and everyone that doesn't do it is going to be left behind.
Well, that's great. I think that's all the questions that we have. We'll give everybody a few minutes back on their Wednesday afternoon. Really want to thank you, Josh. I don't know if you want to end up with anything that I forgot to ask, or one thing I do want is the slides from this presentation, because that will save me a lot of time in the future, guaranteed. I'd like to thank everyone that joined us today, everybody that asked questions. Obviously, like to thank Josh and Zendesk for helping make this possible. And just a little housekeeping: we will start again tomorrow at 11 a.m. If you'd like to join us, we'll have another session at 2 p.m. tomorrow. So you can join us there. Check our website. Don't worry, you'll get an email from us. And if you'd like to review this, we will archive it and send out an email. People are usually asking that question, so I'll just let you know. Don't worry. As soon as it's archived, everybody will get an email. And thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Bob, for hosting, and thanks to everyone for taking a break out of the day to talk to us. I appreciate it, and hope you guys have a great rest of the evening.